think we have all our candidates are here. So let me say good morning to everybody. I'm Andy Thorburn. I'm the president of the Contemporary Policy Institute. Welcome to our forum. First of all, I want to thank all the candidates for taking time out from a very busy campaign schedule to join us this morning. Particularly want to thank the American Association of University Women who have co-sponsored this event with us. So thank you very much for your help and support. But most important, of course, are the people attending. We appreciate you taking time out on a Saturday morning to demonstrate your commitment to public education and to hear about these candidates running for the Superintendent of Public Instruction, a job that doesn't get as much publicity as it should in the California structure. So now here's our plan for this morning. We have prepared questions for the candidates. They'll be given usually 60 seconds, sometimes 90 seconds for a response. We will have in the middle of the program a sort of lightning round where we will ask everybody to respond just yes or no with no elaboration. That'll just be 4 quick questions, a little lightning round. At the end of the lightning round, we will give you an opportunity to go back and maybe add some detail to one of the questions that you thought maybe yes or no didn't provide for enough nuance. We want to stick as closely as we can to the time schedule. So what we're going to do is when any question begins, I will remind you that you have 60 seconds. At the 15-second mark, there will be a hand signal. If you're on gallery view for the panelists, you'll see the hand view up in the left-hand corner. That'll be your 15-second mark. There it is as a sample. That will be your signal that you have 15 seconds left. And at the end of the 15 seconds, we will mute you and go on to the next speaker. Also, we are going to call on you, of course, in alphabetical order, but in the interest of fairness, each time we ask a question, we'll proceed to the next person, the second person, the third person, and do it alphabetically from there. So those are the rules that we're going to follow. And I'm going to start by giving each of you 90 seconds to introduce yourself to the attendees and make an opening comment of whatever you think is appropriate. It will be alphabetical. You'll have 90 seconds, and we'll start with Richard. Unmute yourself and proceed, Richard. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Andy. And thanks for hosting this forum. So I'm Richard Barrera. I'm the president of the San Diego Unified School Board, and I'm in my 18th year on the board in San Diego. We're the second largest district in California. And I also serve as senior policy advisor to our current superintendent, Tony Thurmond, at the California Department of Education. And at CDE, my responsibilities include initiatives like protecting our immigrant students and families, promoting student wellness and reducing chronic absenteeism, as well as accelerating the development of affordable housing for educators and families on school district property. I'm proud of the work that we've done at San Diego Unified, and it's so important that as a state, we get laser focused on results. So today, among all large urban districts in the nation, on the nation's report card, San Diego Unified ranks #1 in both literacy and math. Among all large urban districts in California, we're #1 in literacy, math, graduation rates, college career readiness rates. We got there through a conscious focus of investing directly in our educators. So we have increased salaries by 50% over the time I've been on the board. We provide fully paid family health benefits. We also have invested in our schools with the largest facilities bond program of any district in California. And that focus on investing in our students, investing in our educators has paid off in the form of results. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, Wendy, please proceed.
Hi, I'm Wendy Castaneda Leal, and I've been working in education for a little over 20 years. So my whole career has been in education. I started off as a classroom assistant and worked my way up, and I'm currently a superintendent for a school district here in Kern County. Currently, I work in a rural school district where I've seen a lot of inequities, and this has been my push to run to this office. Never in my life did I think that the richest state in the United States would have students without running water and families without electricity. And so this has been my drive to change this, not only in Kern County, but also across California, because I saw it on Indian reservations when I worked in South Dakota and in Georgia, but never did I imagine that I would see it here in California. I've worked in different counties across California where I have a proven track record of increasing attendance and decreasing chronic attendance. I've also improved academics with the statewide assessment, but also have started the first dual language immersion program in Newark Unified School District. So with this proven track record, I would love to also implement these strategies and initiatives across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nichelle.
I'm Nichelle Henderson. I am a career public school teacher and teacher educator running to be the next state superintendent of public instruction. I'm running to be the top state educator because California needs a plan of action to close achievement gaps and to protect our students. Currently, the superintendent is the guide and overseer of education for TK through 12 schools across the state, from curriculum development, instructional implementation, assessment, and finance reporting. The superintendent does not oversee preschool. The superintendent does not oversee adult school. The superintendent does not oversee community colleges outside of how they intersect with TK education, TK through 12 education. I am a former middle school teacher and former K through 5 public school classroom aide. So I have firsthand knowledge of how chronic underfunding perpetuates the academic, the digital, and the economic divide for our students. And for the past 13 years, I've served as a teacher, educator, and clinical support provider for new and pre-service teachers that are working towards their multiple subjects teaching credentials. And through that work, and also as a community college trustee on the Los Angeles Community College Board, I see how much work needs to be done in our classrooms, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, Frank.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. My name is Frank Lara. I'm very proud to be here and be able to be also on a panelist of such experienced fighters for education. I am currently the Executive Vice President of the United Educators San Francisco, over 6,000 members, who most recently led the first strike in over 50 years, which really shows the crossroads we're at in education, whether we're going to fully fund our educators and lead to the results, as our colleagues were saying. Myself, I've been a teacher. I am a product of public schools, the first to graduate in my family, and have been a teacher for over 10 years, 4th to 5th grade. I came into the profession for the reasons that a lot of us go into the profession, in trying to serve our communities and give back. I saw the power of the unity that comes with educators and families in organizing the first and still the only one housing shelter, temporary housing shelter in our gym for our families here in the city, because you cannot teach children if they're housing insecure, if they're not ready to actually be fed, if they're concerned with the future of their family. I also led an effort during COVID in donating stimulus checks for our undocumented families, and we raised over $100,000 for directly giving to our families. And this is the type of collaboration that I have experienced in organizing. I believe that California is the 4th largest economy in the world, should be accountable as well to fully funding our schools, to not just $20,000 or $28,000 per pupil, but $40,000. If we are to truly transform education, we need to fully fund it, and I'm happy to lead the effort in order to offer that vision.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to Gus.
Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Gus Monomal, running for state superintendent, and let me tell you a little bit about why I'm running for this office. I was the only kid on my block to graduate high school at all, let alone go to college. My neighborhood public high school had a 25% graduation rate for 25 years in a row, with a student population that's 70% Black, 10% Latino, and 5% Asian. There's an entire generation of low-income, mostly Black and brown kids fed into what functions as a pit stop on a school-to-prison pipeline. The only reason that I didn't follow the same path as all the other kids is I won the parent lottery. My parents rented out half our house to another family and squirreled away that rent for years. So although I graduated from a public middle school that I was bused to and all of that, when the time came for high school, they used the money they'd scrimped and saved and sent me to the all-boys Jesuit school in town so that I could get a real education there. And that allowed me to come to California. I went to Pomona College down in Claremont, majored in physics and math, and have gone on to have a great career. I've been a full-time educator for the last 23 years. Last 19 years, I've been an executive of a multi-million-dollar education company that I built. And for the last 4 years, an elected representative of 12,000 people in the Bay Area. It's been a great career. Education was my hand up. I always like to say education is not a handout, it is a hand up. And it could be a hand up for so many more kids in California than it actually is. And I think we owe it to those students to ask hard and sometimes uncomfortable questions about why more students aren't getting a hand up. I so appreciate the opportunity this morning to talk a little bit about the things that we can do to give those kids a hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Al?
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Al Murthy. Thank you very much for convening this Candace Forum and for inviting all of us. I'm a classroom educator. I am an adjunct professor at my local community college, El Camino Community College in Torrance, California, where I teach government and civics. I'm a former president of my local school board. I served on my local school board for 7 years, the Torrance Unified School District. Proud public school parent, and now California Assembly member. I've been serving in the California legislature for 12 years, including serving as chair of the Assembly Education Committee, as well as the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on education funding. As a proud son of immigrants, a product of public schools, and a first-generation college graduate, I know firsthand that public education is still the key to the American dream. And that's why I'm running to be your next state superintendent. And that's why I'm passionate about public education. And that's why I have a proven track record of not only fighting for public education, but getting things done. I've fought to deliver increased state funding for our schools, to fully fund our schools, to fight for more arts and music education, for vocational education, expanding preschool for all, after-school programs, free school meals for all, and to support mental health and well-being. And I look forward to our conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Anthony?
Morning. I'm echoing. Good morning, Anthony Rendon, served in the state legislature, served as speaker for, am I echoing on your end too?
Yes, we have an echo on from you, Anthony. Yeah.
Any
If
suggestions?
you have any other devices open, you can mute those. That would help. If you have
I
anything else.
don't have any other devices open. Anthony Rendon served in the state legislature for 12 years, served as speaker for 7. Proud graduate of the Cal State system, the UC system, the community college system. I'm running for superintendent of public instruction because I saw that when Ryan Walters left the Oklahoma SPI position, and when Donald Trump announced that he was going to close the U.S. Department of Education, I recognized that public education, and more than that, really, the Enlightenment and all rational thought was being attacked in this country. Public education is the core. It's the core of our society. It's the core of everything that built our society, and I think it's under attack now greater than ever before.
Thank you, Anthony. So we're going to switch now to a question format. We appreciate the opening comments, and we appreciate the very strict adherence to the time limit. On these questions, you're going to have 60 seconds, the same system of a hand going up with 15 seconds to go. So the first question is this. Many of you as candidates know, but I don't think the audience necessarily knows, that the office itself of the Superintendent of Public Instruction is being restructured. And there's a lot of bills now being discussed that will restructure the accountability for public education in California in various ways. So we'd like each of you to address the question of, if you are elected, how do you see that job and what is it you think you can accomplish in that role? We're going to do it alphabetically, but this time we're going to start with Wendy. So Wendy, 60 seconds on telling us what you think you can accomplish as this job evolves.
So, I mean, it kind of goes with what Trump has been doing with diminishing the Department of Education. It's something new. I think there's going to be a lot of learning curves as far as what's allowed and what's not allowed and how we both can work in collaboration. I think it's going to be, I always call like a nice dance, trying to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work. But I think the most important thing is to keep students at forefront. Get the voice of the students, the community members, and the parents, and understand that whatever decision that it is implemented or is made, it's going to be in the best interest of the students and what makes the biggest impact, both academically, both with a whole child at the forefront, but also what's best for everybody.
Thank you, Wendy. Nichelle?
Well, as superintendent, what I would do is the actual work of the superintendent, which is to provide oversight and support for our school districts, working directly with our school leaders, our superintendents, our boards and offices of education, our school board members, to set plans of action that are reasonable, that are relevant, that are sustainable to support our students and understand how we can best affect the outcomes of students while we support our teachers and our education workforce. And that is to work with them to create plans, excuse me, and to have metrics for determining how outcomes impact students.
Thank you. Frank?
Thank you for the question. I think in general, we should all be concerned at sort of the consolidation of democracy. I think there's a reason why this position was separate. There's a reason why we're allowed to go into the public and express our values. Myself, I've been very clear in my career that my values are not something to compromise, and it's something that you win people over. It's something that you gain out of experience. So the role of superintendent currently in managing and holding accountable the various districts has to be a two-pronged approach. One way, yes, these are the funds that are available, and these are the goals that legislatures are asking us to achieve in service of the public. What are the best practices? What are the actual supports being given? How are legislators also being held accountable in the fourth largest economy in the world to actually fund the services that are needed? So I think for a role in state superintendent is not just saying, well, we must hold accountable, but offering a vision and holding state leaders that the public is wanting us and voting for us to offer and push forward a vision. So I'll be acting as state superintendent, holding everyone accountable.
Thank you. Gus?
The state superintendent role as it exists today, in my view, has three dimensions to it. First is managing the Department of Education, and under this proposal, that goes away, goes into the governor's office. The other two dimensions, which no superintendent over the last couple decades has really explored, is first to be the facilitator of change in the system. So we talk about the states as laboratories of democracies. I think our districts are the laboratories of education. And so as superintendent, I would go around to all our districts and ask, what is it you're doing that's innovative? What are you doing that's entrepreneurial? And what would you like to be doing? And what's in the way? And let me as superintendent figure out how I can remove some of those barriers so that you can be doing more innovative and more entrepreneurial things. And then over time, as we see which of those new innovative things are actually working, then the other role is to be the advocate for change, to put political pressure upward on the legislature and the governor and the state board to actually implement and scale up the changes that we know are working. So I, as superintendent, want to facilitate other people's creativity on the ground and then remove barriers and then put the pressure on the state board to actually implement those changes as we see what works. Thank you.
Thank you. Al?
Yes. Well, first of all, let me make it clear that I am opposed to the governor's proposal. I mean, why would you want to replace the statewide elected education constitutional officer with an appointed bureaucrat appointed by the governor, further consolidating, centralizing power over education with the governor? I look at what he's doing with Proposition 98 right now. He's withholding $5.6 billion in funding that should be going to our local school districts. And this is a governor that has a pretty good record in supporting public education. And that's a classic example as to, we don't want to consolidate more power with the governor, who has competing interests, who's not laser focused on championing public education. I'm going to continue to champion public education as the statewide constitutional officer in charge of education. And I have a proven track record of demonstrating my passion to deliver.
Thank you. Anthony?
I wouldn't accept the changes. I would fight against them, even if they pass through the legislature. We know that they can change back. I stood up to two governors, Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, on the 7 different budgets that I negotiated with them. I did not agree with Jerry Brown on most education issues. I didn't agree with Gavin Newsom on some education issues. As a lifelong Californian, to put education in the hands of Pete Wilson, I think is dangerous. Put education in the hands of an Arnold Schwarzenegger, a George Dukmajian is dangerous. There's a reason we have an independently elected Superintendent of Public Instruction. I think it's the job of the SPI to frame that, to let folks know about that position, what they do, what they've done in the past. Voters have consistently, on 4 different occasions, these consolidation efforts have been proposed, and on 4 different occasions, Californians have said, we don't want this to happen. For the governor and the legislature to do this, particularly without approval of Californians, is undemocratic. It's a concentration of power. It's the same concentration of power we've
Thank
seen
you, Anthony.
over the world.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Richard?
Thank you, Andy. I agree with all of my colleagues about why this is a bad idea. But let me talk about the way I would govern the California Department of Education. And I'll give you an example. So right now, I chair a working group at the California Department of Education focused on reducing chronic absenteeism. So chronic absenteeism ballooned as students came back from the pandemic, went from about 12% to about 30% statewide. So we're acting in 3 ways. First, we've brought people together and we've set a goal, and that goal is to reduce chronic absenteeism by 50% over the next few years, bring it back to pre-pandemic levels. Second, I convened a group of practitioners, educators, and researchers to establish guidance for schools, school districts, county offices of education on best practices in reducing chronic absenteeism. And finally, I convened a community of practice to bring districts together to examine a district like Compton that is making significant progress. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Richard. Sure. Thank you. So, second question is on a different topic. There's quite a bit of controversy about how well our public schools are performing in the first place. So we'd like to know 2 things. What is your assessment of how public education, how the schools are performing? And what are your concrete plans for improving the areas where you think performance is not what it should be? So we're going to stick with, of course, with alphabetical order, but we're going to start with Nichelle. This is 60 seconds on this question as well, Nichelle.
Thank you for that. So our schools are not performing because on paper, our students are performing very low on standardized tests. We place a very high stakes nature on our standardized testing, and we don't allow classroom teachers to teach for long-term learning and comprehension. We force them to teach to the standards of the assessment. In order to correct that, we have to reform the way that we test. We have to start allowing teachers to do the job, do the work that they want to do and need to do in this classroom, and trust them to understand what our students need. We have to teach students for comprehension, literacy across the curriculum. Literacy is not just reading, it's listening, speaking, writing, and we need to go back to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank?
Well, I take this question from very much the experience I had as a classroom teacher, where you're, regardless of what the larger expectation is of the district, you're sort of held accountable to raising scores despite no context. I think what's important is that as a state superintendent of public instruction managing these thousands of districts, we need to be clear as to what our priorities are. And we need to make clear that there are structural inequities. And until we're held accountable at a higher level, myself as state superintendent, and what specifically is, you cannot talk about stability in terms of reading, writing, math when you're losing a third of your educators. When we're still at the percentages of missing after 7 years, 50% of the educators, that's not a stable system. When you have 18 months average job for superintendents, that you can't even manage 2 budget cycles on that. So I think structurally, the state superintendent needs to be laser focused on providing stability, making sure that the profession actually has professionals that are trained and that are connected with families in order to build up the capacity to educate our children.
Okay, thank you. Gus?
Thank you. My platform is simple. I want every kid who goes through our system to be able to read a book, do math, and get a job. And right now, the system is failing on all of those counts. Less than half of students meet reading standards throughout the system, and about a third of them meet math standards. That's not preparing them to enter the most competitive job market that we've ever seen because of AI and a global workforce. So the way we fix it, on reading, it's science of reading. Mississippi is clobbering us in the national rankings, and even just last year, we couldn't get a decent science of reading bill through our legislature. On math, it's looking at what really works. Singapore has the world's best math curriculum. They've published a commercial version of it. Anybody in this listening to this could have Singapore math in your hands by tomorrow. It's a political choice not to be looking at what we know works, science of reading, and a strong math curriculum. And I would also push for more career counseling and more career technical education so that we have both tracks available for students and they can decide what works best for them. So supporting them in those basic skills, read a book, do math, get a job, that's how we actually uplift our students in the public school system. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Go ahead, Al.
Yes, so as a former school board member and as the former chair of the Assembly Education Committee, my number one priority would be to fully fund our schools. Again, the governor's withholding $5.6 billion in funding that should be going to our school districts at a time where districts are issuing layoff notices. We need to fully fund our schools. Number two, nothing makes a bigger difference in the quality of the classroom education than getting fully credentialed, experienced, and supported teachers in the classroom. I would focus on getting more support for our teachers in the classroom so that they can deliver quality instruction in every classroom, every school, every community. Last but not least, I would continue to champion things like the science of reading. I was a co-author of the science of reading bill that was signed last year that all education advocates supported, including delivering $200 million to support the science of reading instruction. And so I continue to champion best practices like that.
No, thank you, Al. Anthony?
Well, my assessment of how California schools are rating is all over the place. Some schools are doing exceptionally well. We have a handful of the best schools in the country, and we have a lot of schools that are failing. I think the real issue is equity, and it's an issue of equity. We have a lot of the skills, particularly with the smart adoption of the science of reading legislation recently. We have a lot of the skills that we need. We just don't have the equity amongst our schools. I think we need to definitely look at the difference between an enrollment-based model versus an attendance-based model in terms of reimbursing school. Our schools have been chronically underfunded since Proposition 13 passed. I was a big proponent of the split roll. We need to look at Proposition 13 in order to make sure that our school districts and our municipalities aren't cash strapped.
Thank you, Anthony. Richard?
So we've been living for a couple of decades under this sort of corporate reform model of education, which essentially means people are going to sit back, look at easy to understand data like once a year standardized test scores, and then use a rewards and punishment system to try to improve test scores. And by the way, that's never worked. What does work, and what we've seen research consistently show, are efforts like community schools. You create a sense of community, you support families, you support the wellness of young people, and you allow classroom educators and parents and students to have a role in governance and making decisions. You see significant impact in improved results. So we're not needing to scramble around trying to find what works. We know what works. What works is listening to educators and families and students on the ground, not to corporate know-it-alls.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, Wendy?
So I agree with all my colleagues here. I think community schools is very important. I've seen the job done in New York City. There's been groups of consortium go to New York and study it. I think one of the areas where it lacks is always funding. How do we sustain it, or how do school districts sustain it over the years? I think in our California dashboard, to be frank, and I see it every day, is that our tests are not made to only assess a certain demographic. And that's how they're written. Our LPAC tests, who determine if our English learners are reclassified, are harder to pass, and our English only students cannot even pass them. So formulas are created to determine funding, where even one student can disqualify a school district from even receiving supplemental funds.
Thank you, Wendy. So I want to stick with some controversy here. So our next question has to do with charter schools. So we know that charter schools have become an important part of public education in California, but there's controversy around their performance, their accountability. There's a controversy around how they're funded. So I'd like each of you to tell us, what do you see as the proper role of charter schools in California's public education system? It's a 60 seconds, and we're going to start with Frank.
Thank you. And I think it's important the recent laws that have been passed, unfortunately, last year, the one that didn't pass on our charter school accountability, especially given the news of how mismanaged, hundreds of millions of dollars were. No school, when I was a teacher, we were dealing with pennies. I mean, we were talking about $1,000, about how to distribute $1,000 among, 30 teachers. So talk about efficiency. Nothing is more efficient than the public school system. I would work with my colleagues, educators, unions, to make sure that they're held accountable. More importantly, I would prioritize that public school money goes into our public schools. We need to obviously listen to families and find opportunities to expand language programs, expand innovative programs, but do that within the public school system. Because first of all, demand more money into the public school system, but we cannot continue to think that outside of the public schools or there's an alternative model when we're champion democracy and the inclusion of all. We're still fighting the fight for equity, despite the majority of our students being students of color. We have to make sure that the system meets the needs of and has all the resources necessary to meet the needs of our diverse student population within the public school system.
Thank you, Frank. Gus?
The first thing I want everyone listening to this to understand is that a public charter school is a public school. I don't think they're a magic bullet, but I do think they're a very important tool in the toolbox. No one in the neighborhood I grew up in would ever have sent their kid to Roosevelt High School if they'd had another option, or they didn't have another option. Folks don't like it when I say this, but above a certain income level, everybody already has universal school choice. It's only lower income people that aren't allowed choices. So charter schools, they are an important tool in the toolbox, and what makes them work so often is that teachers in charter schools have more freedom of action. To be a traditional public school teacher, you have very, very little freedom of action. If you saw a few students in your class and you thought, well, if I spent a couple hours after school for a couple of weeks with them, I could catch them up. In a charter school, you might be able to do that. In a traditional public school, you won't be able to, even though you see what the problem is and you see what the solution is. You as a teacher, your hands are tied and you can't actually execute that solution. Charter schools offer more freedom for teachers, and that's what makes them so often so successful. And that's why I think they are, in fact, an important tool in the toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you. Al?
Yes. So, I respect the fact that charter schools provide choice, an important choice for many families. But I've been leading the effort in the legislature to strengthen oversight and accountability over charter schools because we, as Frank mentioned earlier, I mean we've seen case after case of these privately operated charter schools committing fraud, corruption, taking taxpayer dollars intended for public education to enrich too many private charter school operators. While I respect that charter schools are part of the landscape, we need to strengthen oversight and accountability to crack down on fraud and corruption.
Okay, thank you. Anthony?
Thanks for the question. SB 1206 and AB 128 were the most ardent and most, I think, well-articulated charter school oversight and accountabilities passed in the history of the state. They were both passed under my speakership. I demanded that they get passed. Charter schools need to be held accountable. The proper role of charter schools is exactly what the role of charter schools were, the reason they were invented, which is to provide experimentation, provide different ideas in terms of curriculum and in terms of focus. We've learned from some charter schools. Some charter schools remain unaccountable, and we need to make sure that we crack down on those schools. But we need to continue to make sure that we're learning from those charter schools that are doing the right thing.
Thank you, Anthony. Richard?
Yeah, I want to build on what Anthony just said. So charter schools started with the notion of, being laboratories of innovation. And we have many charter schools around the state that are just that and are providing strong examples that we can learn from in our entire public education system. What happened was the same corporate reformers that we just talked about that were trying to tell everybody how to improve schools latched on to charters because they thought they were non-union. And that's what that was all about. And they created this controversy over charter schools because they tried to expand them too rapidly and create this notion that they were an alternative to the public school system. Well, of course, many charters have become unionized over the last few years. A lot of those corporate reformers that didn't understand charter schools to begin with have now taken their marbles and gone home because it's not accomplishing what they want, which is a non-union public education system. But we need to get back, to the basic idea that we can learn from community-based charter schools.
Thank you, Richard.
But they're not an alternative. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Wendy.
I think if done correctly, charter schools can be a great asset for every student, every family around California. The issue is that at the state level, we underfund public schools, and then we initiate all these programs and tell school districts, here, go at it, and there's no support or there's not enough funds, and then there's no accountability, and districts are left with telling teachers, okay, you need to do this now because this is what's required. And teachers are there overwhelmed, not knowing what to do and feeling more overwhelmed, getting their prep times taken away and feeling like there's more issues to deal with. And I think that's what intrigues parents, that charter schools are able to have more flexibility in the curriculum they teach and the experiences that they do. And teachers ultimately get paid more because there's more funding. I think there just needs to be more accountability.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. And Michelle.
Yeah, thank you for that. So my feeling is that the proper role of charter schools is to be a relevant option for families, but when there is no public charter school, public traditional school around, and there are charter schools that are doing some really, really great work. However, it's usually in areas where, such as rural areas where geography and distance are challenges. I believe that if we fully fund our public schools, our traditional public schools, and provide and pay teachers a living wage, provide wraparound resources for students, and bring the arts and bring services back and programs back into our schools, charter schools become less relevant. So my goal and intention as Superintendent of Public Instruction is to make charter schools irrelevant by uplifting our public schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate all those answers. And now we're going to just switch gears a little bit and maybe give you a little chance to relax a little bit more. But we'll ask some questions focusing on the issues of enforcement. So this is yes or no round. This is just, you can't, we don't want to hear any reasons, just yes or no. And I do want to remind you, I think there's 4 of these questions. And at the end of that time, we'll give you about a minute. So if you want to go back to one of these yes or no questions and kind of expand on it, you'll have a chance to do that. So these are yes or no questions. And here's the first one. We're going to stick with the alphabetical order, of course. So we'll begin with Gus, just as a heads up. So first one, I want to talk to you about the California Health for Youth Act. So, this is a mandate that requires a kind of comprehensive and accurate, inclusive sexual education in both junior high, middle school rather, and high school, including HIV prevention education. But it hasn't been uniformly implemented around the state. So the yes or no question, starting with Gus, is, do you support stronger enforcement of CHIA to make sure that school districts do comply with the mandate? Gus?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
It's a little bit like, it's easy for you people that were in the legislature. It's kind of like a roll call. So we're making it easier for you people. But we're going to stick with enforcement. So I have another question for you. We also have a mandate requiring ethnic studies, which was intended to be a requirement for high school graduation beginning in 2030. But the implementation was stalled because of lack of funding. And it's a fairly controversial subject. So the question, the yes or no question is, do you support allocating the fundings to support the district so that they can adopt the current curriculum framework of ethnic studies that was published by the state of California? So it's yes or no on ethnic studies mandate. Are you in favor of funding it? And we're going to start with Al.
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Nichelle?
Most definitely.
Frank?
Yes.
Gus?
Nope.
Gus, did you want to say? I'm sorry, I actually didn't hear you. Did you say?
Sorry. No, I took the other side.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure. All right, and sticking with enforcement one more time. We have a law in California around the uniform complaint procedure. And the purpose of it is, of course, to help make school districts accountable so parents can file a uniform complaint. But you would find that almost everyone would say that that system is ineffective, it's broken, it's bureaucratic, there's no follow through. There's really no enforcement on the UCP process from the California Department of Education or from the Superintendent of Public Instruction. So our question, yes or no question for you is, if you are elected, are you willing to commit to creating a robust system that would correct these problems so that we wouldn't have to have parents enter into litigation? So are you in favor of a robust enforcement and development of a uniform complaint procedure? So that's a yes or no question. And we're going to start with Anthony.
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Nichelle?
Of course.
Frank, we'll count that as a yes or no. Frank?
Yes.
Gus?
Yes.
And Al?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to hopefully we'll create a little controversy with the last one of the yes or no questions. So there's a federal program which allows states to opt into the federal voucher program, where families could receive, I think, up to $1,700 of tax credits to offset the expenses of private schools. But it's voluntary. States can opt in or not. So the yes or no question is, do you believe that California should opt in? Richard?
No way.
Wendy?
No.
Nichelle?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Frank?
No.
Gus?
Yes.
Al?
No.
Anthony?
No.
Okay. So I know that some of the yeses and nos, probably you meant yes, but, or no, unless. So we want to give you about 60 seconds just to remind you. We talked about the Healthy Youth Act, ethnic studies, uniform complaint procedure, federal voucher program. So any one of those four, we're going to give you 60 seconds to expound on anything you want to that requires a little more detail. And we're going to start with Wendy.
All right, thank you. So I'll focus on the Healthy Youth Act because this has been very controversial across school districts. This law was passed and required by districts, and then there was no guidance, just, this is what you need to cover in these specific grades in middle school and in high school. And so school districts had a contract out. A lot of school districts had a contract out, which made the cost so much higher. And now we have an increase in spending where these dollars could have been spent elsewhere. And so now we're having to pay these companies to come in, and it becomes a situation where the students don't feel that connection with these outsiders. And so the attachment to feel open to talk about the situations where it's a very sensitive subject. You need somebody in there where the students can relate, ask questions, because the whole purpose of this is preventative, right? To make better choices. And they're not able to do that when the resources are not really explained.
Thank you, Wendy. Nichelle?
I meant my yeses and I meant my nos. I will say for the federal voucher program, public funds should be used for public school. And as superintendent, I will make sure that that happens. And again, my yeses are my strong yeses and my no is absolutely not.
Well, thank you. Frank?
Thank you. And I want to highlight, I think, ethnic studies, because I myself, in my own consciousness, my own way I show up, is because of ethnic studies. It's the work that was done in the 70s. Folks literally went on strike, hunger strikes, in order to see themselves represented in the system. And if we are to be, there's oftentimes in California this perception that the national shift to the right wing is something that Californians don't value, but this is our fight. The fact that we are still thinking that ethnic studies is quote unquote controversial, when in 2014 the vast majority of the population now turned into Latino, largely Mexican American, when largely our students in the public school system are students of color, and we're actually questioning whether California should be representing that curriculum, should be educating students, means that we're not taking serious the moment that we're in. There's a whole generation that's only seen Trump, that's only seen MAGA, and there's a reason for that. We have to counter that by educating the diversity, the power that the people have had in changing that reality, and ethnic studies is key, and we should be funding that.
Thank you. Thank you. Gus?
Sure. So the the Healthy Youth Act, that's a past funded law under my administration. We will always follow the law rigorously. So happy to support that one since that is a passed and funded law. Ethnic studies is passed but not funded, and that gives a great opportunity to go back and actually revise the curriculum to be a values neutral curriculum instead of what it is, which is a propaganda piece today. The complaint procedure, again, there's a law for that, and it is not, the complaint procedure for parents is not a courtesy we extend to parents. It is a legal requirement. And so absolutely, we will make sure that that is followed rigorously. And then the federal program, your local billionaire down the street, if California opts out of this, all that happens is the money that they donate will go outside the state of California to some other state. They still get to donate the money. So you've just heard a bunch of people talk about needing to fully fund the schools, are now willing to let a bunch of money walk outside the state of California just to performatively give the president the middle finger. So I think we should just opt into this and keep the money within the boundaries of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Al?
Yeah, so as the only candidate in this race that has the combined experience of statewide education policy leadership as the former chair of the Assembly Education Committee, as well as local school district governance as a former local school board president and trustee, I've always been very mindful of that balance between statewide mandates versus respecting local control. But the bottom line is we need to make sure that we are supporting and uplifting all students, through programs like making sure that we're teaching reproductive health through our health classes, that we're teaching the diverse history of Californians through ethnic studies, and that we're not undermining public education by relying on federal school voucher funding.
Thank you. Anthony?
Thanks for the questions. I don't have any yeah buts. I have yeah ands. I think vouchers lead to greater inequities and a concentration of good students in certain schools and students with challenges in other schools. I think sex education and ethnic studies are needed in our schools, and it's needed for our kids. And I think greater parent involvement and greater avenues for parent feedback are necessary and should be made easier.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I want to talk about the voucher scheme. So, as you mentioned, Andy, it's $1,700, for an individual, $3,500 for private schools cost $20,000 to $50,000. So, who's going to benefit from that? It's people who are already paying tuition for private schools. It doesn't open up slots in private schools for people who otherwise can't afford them. But what it does do is it means that the federal government this year will spend 4 times the amount it spends on special education, which the federal government has never met its responsibilities to fully fund special education, on private school vouchers. And any candidate that's running for Congress right now needs to be asked, are you willing to get rid of this federal voucher scheme and put that money into special education?
Thank you. So now we're going to switch back to some questions, question format. These will be also 60-second questions. And I'm going to start with one that a couple of you did refer to in your earlier comments about the teacher shortage. So we know that California already faces a teacher shortage. We know that in a recent survey, almost half of the teachers said they plan to either retire or quit within the next 10 years. And they mentioned things like burnout, financial pressures, workloads, lack of support. And at the same time that that's going on, there's fewer college students going into education. So our question to each of you, I'm going to start with Nichelle. Our question is, how would you, as the, if you get elected to this position, how would you address the teacher shortage, particularly in high need areas, and how would you improve teacher retention? So we'll start with Nichelle.
Well, thank you for that question. I deal with this work every day because for the past 13 years, I have worked as a teacher educator and a clinical support provider in a teacher credentialing program run by the state university system. And what I'm seeing in my new and pre-service teachers is that we put a lot of barriers in front of them to become teachers. And when they become teachers, we don't provide support. And so burnout is real. We have overcrowded classrooms. We have high stakes standardized tests. We have a system of social promotion where students are matriculating from grade to grade, not mastering any of the Common Core state standards. So what I do in my program, what my program does is we specifically recruit teachers based off of gender and ethnicity to have representation in our schools, because kids need to see a person in order to want to do that thing.
Thank you. Frank?
Thank you for the question. I think I was a master teacher for half of my career in teaching, and the same experiences, unfortunately, that were preventing educators from staying in the profession continue. I think as State Superintendent of Public Instruction, it's so critical for educators, future educators, students to see their political leadership actually pointing to the needs and actually offering resources. The coordination, like for example, here in San Francisco, we should not be having a teacher shortage when we have all these great institutions, UC Berkeley, USF, Stanford. And the reason they don't want to go in is because they hear that teacher wages are actually down, that they're going to end up in debt. So how do you coordinate with legislators to make sure that there's funding and that districts are using that funding in order to pay for education and public service? It comes down, when we talk about fully funding schools, we also need to treat educators with respect and fully fund their wages. Make sure that, if it's an issue of equity, the most unstable schools, the schools that are most struggling, is where there's a high turnover. How do we stabilize that? How, as State Superintendent of Public Instruction, am held accountable to that measurement?
Thank you, Frank. Gus?
Sure, this is a great question. So in my platform, I have two key planks that relate to this question. First is a proposal to repurpose most of the future growth in the ed budget to hiring more new teachers so that we can get the class sizes down, which fixes two things. Number one, we have terrible outcomes in a lot of our districts, and getting the class sizes down in those districts will allow students to get more contact with a teacher, which is how we actually elevate the student performance. But it also makes the teacher's job better, because instead of having to teach 30 kids, we can get that down under my proposal to about 15 kids per class, which is a gigantic difference in your quality of life as a teacher. And then second is a statewide bonus system, which rewards teachers for being, it's performance related. So if you're a top tier teacher in the most difficult districts, the bonus for that is 30,000. Like, it's a real bonus, like a very large size. We can change our teachers' lives if we give them smaller class sizes and we give them a bonus system that actually ties to their performance. Thank you.
Thank you. Al?
Yeah, I've been working closely with teachers in the legislature to champion this issue of attracting and supporting good teachers, because, again, nothing makes a bigger difference in the quality of education than getting good teachers in every classroom. I've worked with teachers to champion, not only fully funding our schools, but to tie that to increasing teacher pay. I've introduced several times legislation to increase teacher pay by 50% over the next 10 years. I've also championed the importance of fully funding our schools to reduce class sizes, as well as to provide more special education support, like paraeducators. And I've also written legislation that has delivered funding for paying student teachers and other ways to alleviate the financial obstacles to becoming a teacher.
Thank you, Al. Anthony?
I think the way you ensure a greater number of teachers and retaining teachers is to, first of all, fully fund our schools, making sure that you're holding the governor accountable with respect to Proposition 98 funding, and making sure that the total amount is being calculated. I also have to make sure that we look at the enrollment versus attendance-based models that fund our schools, And again, this is sound like a broken record, but our schools have been chronically underfunded since the passage of Proposition 13. It's something we absolutely need to look at. We also need to look, two school districts in the state are looking at workforce housing for school employees. They're not as far along as I'd like them to be, but I think that's something that we need to look at as well.
Thank you, Anthony. Richard.
So nationally, about 50% of teachers leave the profession within their first 5 years. In our district, 93% stay. And that's the reason we get better student outcomes. And so why is that? It's because we pay our teachers, we provide fully paid family health benefits, we have the teacher voice relevant in making decisions about a school. We reduce class sizes. We provide more support for special ed. All of that has come about through negotiated agreements. And what we're seeing around the state right now is that teachers are coming out and organizing and demanding that working conditions and compensation increase. That's the most important fight going on in California public education since Prop 13 nearly 50 years ago.
Thank you, Richard. And Wendy.
Well, first of all, we need to make sure our schools are fully funded, and that would be one of my priorities, because without fully funded schools, we can't pay our teachers a living wage for them to survive. We need to decrease our classrooms. We need to provide incentives for our teachers, especially those working in Title I schools, especially those who are going to be working in special education, but also some type of grow your own program where we're working with the communities who are going to college, those adults that are going to college, and growing the people that are from those rural communities to give back to the school system. So I would propose also working with the colleges nearby to really target those adults that are interested in education and having them come back and supporting more of the induction support for teacher credentials.
Thank you, Wendy. So I have one final question before we have a chance to do some closing comments. And I thought it'd be good to end with something that might be a little bit controversial. It has to do with religion in the public schools, religion in the classroom. So we know that the presence of religion and the role of religion in our schools is controversial. So I want to ask each of you to respond to the question as, are you at all concerned about the encroachment of religious influence in public education? And if you are concerned about it, what do you propose as countermeasures? So we're going to start with Frank.
Thank you for the question. I'm not concerned if we actually show the value and importance of democracy. And when we fully fund schools and fully fund public education, I think it can reinvigorate the hope of what democracy can show, can prove, and the outcomes. I think this idea that we should be fearful is presented to us as the alternative over organizing, over actually connecting with our families and showing them that if a robust, fully funded classroom with low classroom sizes, and we're talking, as was stated, under 20 students for young children, 25 students for anything above, ninth grade. If we can actually transform education in the way that families want to see, then they won't look to other alternatives and other things that supposedly will solve the issue. It's about economics. It's about funding. It's about stability. And, religion and spirituality and the hope we all see in universal human values, those are things that should lead us to be better people, to be a better democracy, to be better united.
Okay, thank you. Gus?
Yeah, I also don't think there's I think the premise of that question is not something we need to worry about here in California. That may be something that other states need to wrestle with more. But I do want to make sure that we also don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I teach a class called An Introduction to the Bible as Literature. So it's not a religion class in any stretch of imagination, but it is about teaching kids to understand what the stories are that so much of our culture touches on. So when Martin Luther King talks about making it to the promised land, you don't know what he's referencing when he says that. You're missing the power of that speech. So I just want to make sure that we don't sort of overreact to stuff that's happening outside of California, and in the process leave our kids less able to understand the richness of their own culture. It's the same argument for why I think you want to have a values neutral ethnic studies program. You do want people to understand the richness of their culture, and the richness of American culture, but also just understanding some of what fed into classical Western culture is important in that as well. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Al?
Yes, I'm fully, respectful of individual and family choices when it comes to their religions. But I mean, I think it's clear ever since the founding of our country, a core principle of our country has always been the separation of church and state, and that extends to our public schools, our publicly funded schools. And it continues to be an issue here in the state of California. Last year, when I was carrying the bill to strengthen charter school oversight and accountability, we found that there are a lot of people that are using these charter school vouchers on religious schools and their programs. And so, we need to make sure that we strengthen oversight and accountability so that we continue to respect this core principle of separation of religion and publicly funded schools.
Thank you. Anthony?
I'm absolutely petrified by the idea of a merging of religious thought, particularly in our schools. And I think it's something that we all have to worry about. The reason the superintendent of public instruction in the state of Oklahoma quit his job and created a national organization that's being funded by the Heritage Foundation is specifically to do this. We have seen time and time again so many things that have happened via the Trump administration that we thought could never happen in this country. And one after the other, we see these things happening. The separation of our public schools and religious thought is something that has to be absolute. And it's something that I think is very much in danger. I can't understate this enough. The Enlightenment itself, right now, the Enlightenment itself, the idea of scientific method, falsification, all of that is in danger in this country.
Thank you, Anthony. Richard?
Yeah, so I grew up in a really diverse community in eastern San Diego County, families coming from all over the world, different religions, different experiences. And what came out of that through the public schools was a shared sense of moral purpose and living a purposeful life. And I think the public schools are the vehicle which can lead to young people actually respecting different experiences and different sense of how to lead a purposeful life. The problem is always when some people want to impose their particular religion on other people. And that's not respecting the diversity of California. And it's also not understanding the role of the public school system. So celebrating our diversity and how that leads to young people wanting to live a purposeful life is something that the public schools should always be promoting.
Thank you, Richard. Wendy?
So I agree with Gus and Richard that there has to be some type of context to that religion, but I don't, there still has to be that separation. Like where we're trying to explain like the Bible or certain types of religion in an educational or standard format, then that's fine. We want to enhance these experiences. We want our students to be culturally diverse. So I get that. If we're doing a, culturally diverse day in the schools, then that's fine. But there has to be a limit where we're trying to impose a certain religion to our students in the public schools. I don't agree with that. But as far as expanding the knowledge, having, making all students aware of the religions or the religious beliefs that are around our community, I'm all in favor for that. But as far as enforcing a religion, I don't support that.
Thank you. Thank you. Nichelle?
Yes, I'm not fearful of the encroachment of religion in our schools. However, I do believe that we should be mindful of how we demonstrate respect for diversity and the diversity of belief systems in our classrooms to make sure that we give students a sense of pride in self. I don't approve of teaching religion in our public schools and as a way to impose a belief system onto students through the lens of bias. But we should be mindful of diversity as it pertains to religion and acknowledging students and families' religious beliefs and how they impact student learning.
Thank you, Nichelle. And I want to thank all of you for answering all these questions and sometimes with great detail and mostly sticking to the time limits. We appreciate that. But I want to give each of you a chance to kind of summarize your views of the position that you're running for, and some of the issues we've discussed, and anything else that you want to bring into the discussion. So we're going to give each of you 90 seconds to make a closing comment and cover whatever material, of course, you think is relevant. So we're going to start with Gus, but this is 90 seconds, and we'll give you the same hand signal when there's 15 seconds to go. Go ahead, Gus.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. The next superintendent is going to step into a very different role. We should assume that the governor's proposal is going to go through. The new superintendent will be a champion for education, except the statute doesn't define what it actually means to be a champion for education. I want you to understand that as your next superintendent, I will be first and foremost a champion for kids. This is a system. Our public education system is a system that is run by adults for adults today. That's how it works. It doesn't matter how often somebody says the word student-centered. It is a system that is run by adults for adults. Kids don't have a champion, so I will be a champion first and foremost for the kids. That means making sure every kid who goes through the system is able to read a book, do math, and get a job, be able to get those basic skills so that they are prepared to go out and enter a world that is very, very, very competitive in a way that none of us have ever experienced when we first entered that world. So I'm going to be very, very focused on making sure they get science of reading, making sure they get a better math curriculum, making sure they're getting the college, the career counseling that they need, or the career technical education that they need to be able to go on into the job market and be successful. Education can and should be a hand up for all our students in California. It's unfortunate that it isn't, but as superintendent, I'll be working night and day to make sure that every student in California gets that hand up. And that's going to be my role and focus as your next superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you. Al.
Yes, thank you. I'm running to be your next state superintendent because I have a proven track record of, being passionate for and fighting for public education. I'm the only candidate in this race that has the combined experience of statewide education policy leadership, local school district leadership, governance, classroom teaching experience, and as a public school parent. And I have the track record of delivering increased state funding, introducing legislation to pay our teachers more. I wrote the law to keep ICE out of our public schools. I wrote the law to fight book banning, and I wrote the law that became Proposition 2, the $10 billion statewide school bond measure to fix and upgrade our schools. And because of my track record, I'm proud to be endorsed by the Association of California School Administrators, representing local school superintendents throughout the state, endorsed by the California Federation of Teachers, endorsed by the California School Employees Association. I'm endorsed and supported by all of these career educators, education leaders throughout the state of California because of my proven track record, and I hope to earn your vote on June 2nd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Anthony.
Thanks for this conversation. Unfortunately, I think it comes at a time when we're facing some incredibly existential threats to our democracy, existential threats to public education. You see that all over the country, and in California, we're not immune to that either. I think we need a superintendent of public instruction who has a track record of fighting back against the federal government. When I was Speaker, we sued the federal government about 14 times, won 12 of those lawsuits. Ultimately, any dispute between national and state governments is going to need to be resolved in the courts. Those efforts are efforts that I've led in the past, and we need to make sure that we need them again. We need to save Head Start. We need to save about $2 billion in programs that the Federal Department of Education gives to our states, and I'm ready to lead those efforts to protect them.
Thank you, Anthony. Richard.
Yeah, I appreciate this forum, Andy. So I'm a first-generation American, a first-generation Californian. My dad came here from Colombia. My grandparents on my mom's side came here through Ellis Island from Europe. I had the privilege of growing up in a public education system that was supported by that generation of Californians. So that group of people coming out of World War II, coming into the middle class, first in their families to buy homes, first in their families to go to college, they made the decision to invest their prosperity into creating the best public education system in the world. And we think our K to 12 system, our community colleges, UC, CSU, that generation invested California's prosperity back into our public school system. We've been living nearly 50 years in a situation where the families that I represent in San Diego are also first generation families working 2 or 3 jobs to provide for their students, making the same sacrifices that my parents did. But we, as a generation of Californians, have not invested our current wealth back into our public schools. In fact, if you look at the percentage of our state wealth that's invested back into our public schools, we're at rock bottom. We need to turn that around. We need to get ourselves organized. I'm proud to be supported by the 300,000 educators from the California Teachers Association, school board members, our current superintendent. We need to organize to build the collective power to deliver the greatest public school system back to future generations.
Thank you. Wendy?
So I myself am a public school product. I didn't grow up in California. I grew up in New York City in Black Harlem. I went to school in Spanish Harlem. Both of my parents immigrated, even though my mom is half Native American. She was a migrant worker. And so I am a first generation college graduate and the first one that we know of who got their doctorate degree ever, and the first teacher in my family. So as your state superintendent, I do believe that every child should have a fair path to success, regardless of where they live or what language they speak. I plan to remove barriers to help students thrive here in California. I will support multilingual learners. I will expand dual language programs and ensure that teachers have the right training to support these type of schools. I want better outcomes for English learners and will focus on biliteracy standards. I want to help students with disability by ensuring that teachers are trained correctly, are supported, and all of that stems to funding our schools sufficiently, but also giving the support to school districts.
Thank you, Wendy. Nichelle?
Thank you. So first, I'd like to thank CPI and AAUW for hosting this forum. My endorsers are young people, students across the state, community leaders and educators, not special interests. I don't make public statements and private deals. And although this is a nonpartisan seat, I am a Democrat. In my reelection to the Los Angeles Community College District in 2024, I earned over 1 million votes in LA County. Not one other candidate can say that. I am a mother and a grandmother, and most importantly, I am a teacher with a vested and personal interest in student success. I am a proven leader and advocate for students and educators across the state. I do not shy away from difficult conversations or difficult decisions, and I stand 10 toes down on my word. And this is the type of leadership that our students deserve. And it's time that we have a superintendent with a solid background in education to lead California's public education system. And I am that candidate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Frank?
Thank you again to CPI for hosting this. And also, I think it's a very inspiring panel to show that the leaders who are stepping up at public schools are such in alignment. At a time that, there are thousands and thousands of union members, educators taking to the streets, striking for the first time in 150 years for the current one down in LA, it's showing that we're at a crossroads. And the only way we're going to get beyond that crossroads, as we're saying here, is about funding. Let's not pretend that the money is not there. We had a war is being launched at a national level, billions of dollars are being prioritized, and nobody questions that money, right? Those in power are not going to question that. And a similar thing, if we're actually going to provide an alternative in California, let's be bold about that. I'm the only socialist running under the Peace and Freedom Party. And that's important because in California, for the last over a decade, we've had 2/3 supermajority in the state of California. And while we're saying we should fund it, it's not actually voted on. So with the coalition that I've been able to build, many people are surprised, despite my own, entrenchment in my values and the clarity, you can still build coalition, but always making it clear to the people you are speaking in front of that you will not give up the values of fully funding schools. You will not fall into the trap of demanding more accountability to the workers, to the educators, to the families, while the system does not prioritize their needs. We can work together, as we're seeing here in the panel, but we have to root ourselves in the working class, in the families who can and will fight to win the schools our students deserve.
Well, thank you, Frank, and thank you to all the panelists. We really appreciate your taking out the time to share your thoughts. Of course, we really thank the people who are listening in. They're the ones that really count, the voters. We mentioned, of course, the American Association of University Women have been a very important co-sponsor. But I want to remind everybody on behalf of the candidates that ballots arrive pretty soon. Next week, ballots will start going to the post office. So we're going to have an election. It's coming up pretty soon. And on that election ballot, there will be a line that says, who do you want to vote for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction? This is a position that obviously the people on this call, all these attendees are aware of. We hope that the panel gave you some insight into these candidates and will help guide your choice. But more important than that, we hope that you'll take this opportunity to talk to your circle of friends about this position, because all of us know that as people vote on these very complicated ballots, as you go down the ballot, voting drops off. And so here we have one of the most important positions in the state, person that's in charge of our state education system, and it gets a lot fewer votes than the governor position at the top. So we hope that the panel discussion not only helps you learn about the candidates, but will incentivize you to go out and talk about the importance of this position and help other people participate in the democratic process of electing the leader for California's public school system. Thank you to everybody for participating. Good luck on Election Day. We'll see you in June. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.